Welcome everyone. I am Behrouz Qamari Tabrizi. I'm the director of Sharmin Bijan Mossavar-Rahmani Center for Iran and Persian Law Studies. It's such a beautiful day today outside. Everyone should get extra credit for being here inside rather than being outside enjoying this beautiful blue sky and shining sun. Possibly this blue sky we owe it to Professor Mehan for bringing it from Texas, because she just arrived last night, and with her came this beautiful weather. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Asma Mehan, who's a researcher, educator, and architect working at the intersection of architectural humanities and critical urban studies. She's currently an assistant professor at Texas Tech University College of Architecture. She's the author of the books Tehran, From Sacred to Radical, about which we're going to hear plenty today, and also Kuala Lumpur, Community Infrastructure and Urban Inclusivity, which came out just 2 years ago. Dr. Mehan is recently appointed as the coordination team, as a leader of coordination team of the Young Academics Network of the Association of European Schools of Planning. She received her PhD in the Architecture, History, and Project program in October 2017 from the Politecnico di Torino. I have to practice my Italian. How does that sound? Politecnico di Torino. After finishing her PhD, she worked as a senior researcher at various European universities in different cities, such as Porto, Leiden, Delft, Torino, Berlin, and Manchester, among others. Her primary research and teaching interests include architectural humanities, critical urban studies, spatial planning, and heritage studies. She has authored over 50 articles and essays in scholarly books and professional journals in multiple languages, in English, Persian, Italian, on different aspects of critical urban studies. It's a privilege to have her here, and she will speak for around 45 minutes. We were sort of bargaining about the time, 45 to 50 minutes, and then we have a few minutes for your questions at the end. And please help me to welcome Dr. Mehan.
Thank you. Before starting my presentation, I want to specifically thank to Professor Behrouz Qamari Tabrizi for his kind invitation. And hello everyone, my name is Asma Mehan, and I'm working as an assistant professor at the Huckabee College of Architecture at Texas Tech University in Lubbock. I am delighted to present my recently published monograph titled Tehran, From Sacred to Radical, published by Routledge back to 2022. It's an honor to be part of the Wednesday seminars at the Sharmin Bijan Mossavar-Rahmani Center for Iran and Persian Gulf Studies. Thank you all for joining today. My book, Tehran From Sacred to Radical, examines the interplay between democracy, urban space transformations, and modernity in architecture. It explores the politics of architecture and the role of power struggles in shaping public spaces, drawing on diverse disciplines, including urban studies, architectural history and theory, and cultural geographies. The book aims to decolonize the notion of public space in the global South, focusing on both Western and non-Western perspectives. The target audience includes academics, policymakers, architects, urban designers, and professionals working on the built environment, as well as anyone interested in creating more democratic public spaces and understanding the complex relationship between architecture, urban space, and political power. The presentation here mirrors the book structure: prologue, epilogue, and the main body of the book or book chapters: city of political religious reasons, city of modern reasons, city of power reasons, radical urbanism, and insurgent cities. But here it's important to also note that what motivated me to write this book and explore the intricate connection between politics and Tehran's architecture and urban identity. As a city, Tehran is often overshadowed by its politicians and political figures who shaped its international image. My motivation to write this book stemmed from a desire to uncover the depth and complexity of this relationship, highlighting how architecture and urban form are influenced by politics and vice versa. In this book, I delve into fascinating interplay between the city's physical landscape and political identity. By examining this unique relationship, I hope to provide a fresh perspective on Tehran, showcasing how its urban features are both influenced by and inspiring to its political landscape. The book offers a unique understanding of the city, transcending its reputation as merely a political hub and illuminating the captivating symbiosis between its built environment and political climate. I wrote this book to uncover lesser-known academic traditions on political discourse related to urban form. The book addresses crucial questions. Is there a connection between spatial transformation and political changes? How is urban space used for symbolic manifestations of power and social control? How do urban nodes like squares become political apparatuses in social demonstrations and revolutions? In exploring these questions, the book sheds light on the complex interplay between politics, urban space, and social movements in Tehran, emphasizing the importance of public squares in shaping the city's political landscape. As someone who was born and raised in Tehran, my personal experiences have also informed my writing in this book. Growing up in the city, I witnessed the ways in which political changes impacted the urban landscapes and the role that public squares played in social movements and protests. The book is not only an academic exploration of these issues, but also a personal one, as I draw on my own experiences to illustrate the complex relationship between politics, urban space, and social movements in Tehran. Through this lens, I hope to provide readers with a unique understanding of the city's history and its ongoing transformation. In my book project, the diverse experiences and opportunities I have had as a researcher, educator, and collaborator in various research centers and universities across Iran, Italy, Australia, Germany, Switzerland, Portugal, Netherlands, and currently US have been instrumental. These invaluable experiences have provided me with a broader perspective and a deep understanding of different Asian and European contexts, which have greatly enriched my analysis of Tehran's urban transformation. Institutions such as Politecnico di Torino, Deakin University, University of Porto, TU Delft, ZKU Berlin, EPFL in Switzerland, Leiden University, and Texas Tech University have allowed me to conduct this cutting-edge research. The first chapter of the book explores the political religious foundations of the square. The concept of the square as a political religious order in the ideogram of the city is a unique approach to understanding public spaces, particularly in non-Western cultures like Japan and the Middle East. This chapter aims to explore the various interpretations and meanings of a square in different cultural contexts and how they have evolved over time. The idea of squares as symbols of authority and the foundation for urban growth has been present throughout history. The evolution can be traced back to the classical origins of Greek agoras or Italian piazzas. In the 20th century, Japanese architects such as Kenzo Tange began to develop terms like communication space to bridge the gap between Western and Eastern understanding of public spaces. In Middle Eastern cities, sacred spaces have a strong association with religion, culture, and societal relations. The term sacred in this context is connected to the concept of deepness or space with depth. These spaces have often served as central nodes for community gatherings and cultural events, reflecting their significance within the urban fabric. Kiev's Central Square became the focal point of 2014 Maidan or Maidan uprising. And the word Maidan, meaning the open space or square, has its roots in Arabic, Turco-Persian, and Persian languages. Squares have played vital roles in commerce, defense, politics, and culture throughout history. Examples include the Greek Agora, Roman Forum, and Tiananmen Square in Beijing. These spaces have been essential for civic engagement, teaching, religion, and different participatory democracy, reflecting the importance of public spaces in urban life. Iranian squares, rooted in Greco-Mesopotamian style, served as cultural, economic, and official exchange centers, such as the examples like Firuzabad and Persepolis. The Maidan concept in Islamic lands replaced Roman fora and Byzantine hippodromes, with mosques, open spaces, replacing the agora's function. Baghdad urban design exemplifies the integration of temporal and spiritual sovereignty. The Greek word paradeiso, meaning an enclosed garden or walled enclosure, has origins in Old Persian and symbolizes the earthly image of paradise. Achaemenid and Sassanid architecture feature walled gardens, which were viewed as microcosms of original perfection. Central courtyards play a critical role in Iranian architecture, reflecting the importance of emptiness. These courtyards, often found in Mesopotamian and Iranian houses, can be seen in Iranian square on a grand scale. Iranian plazas can be considered as city courtyards with defined boundaries, and their central space represent an introverted characteristics as an uncovered courtyard of the city. This chapter delves into the city square or Maidan in Iran, tracing its transformation through modernity. The Maidan has been integral to city projects, mirroring theological ideologies and socio-political climates. The Safavid dynasty period is considered as it significantly impacted Iranian art, architectural, and urban history. The chapter aims to connect fundamental archetypes, thoughts, ideologies, foundations, and frameworks. It analyzes and discusses the most dominant political square concept from pre-modern times, including the Safavid era to the present, shaping the city's ideogram. The second chapter of the book examines the planning politics that transformed Tehran through the demolition of old city walls and creation of long boulevards using a comparative regional analysis. It aims to interpret specific histories, local intricacies, and challenges faced by various actors. The study focuses on identifying urbanization paradigms and the special manifestations of internal mediations during Tehran's modernization project. The chapter addresses the international exchange of planning ideas by analyzing the street maps of 1933 and 1937 of Tehran from the first Pahlavi era. The bourgeois city paradigm were part of the larger challenge of urbanization in the 19th century, which involved building the Western modern utopia framed with industrialization and growing urban population. Haussmann's urbanization of Paris coincides with the first year of expansion and replanning of Tehran's bastion, which was commissioned to General Alexander Bohler, a French military engineer and instructor at the first modern institution and French language school in Iran. Bohler's plan was a clear formal copy of Vauban's system without delivering its military function. This shows the transnational flow of planning ideas and practices and the influence of Western models of urban planning on non-Western cities. In 1868, General Alexander Bohler led a team that designed a new octagonal city plan based on Vauban's system for fortification. The new walls were built due to the population growth, establishment of modern institute, and flood control. The new walls created a different urban structure from the old, resulting in a bipolar urban urban structure with traditional institutions in old parts of the city and the new ones in newly developed areas. In the 20s and 30s, Tehran underwent a significant transformation under Reza Shah's urban planning initiatives. He sought to create a unique architectural landscape that blended modern European design with ancient Iranian influence. This involved opening a space for the expansion of the city and decentralizing the dense urban fabric. Approximately 10% of the city was transformed into open space, including wide avenue, public squares, and city parks in order to bring Tehran to look more like European cities. These urban renewal projects provided the tabula rasa, a blank slate, for building a new future for the rising bourgeoisie and realizing a utopian vision for the city. Reza Shah's desire to restore the past glories of Persia is reflected in the architecture of the period. Archaeology played a significant role in positioning high culture at the heart of politics in modern Iran. Ernest Herzfeld, a German archaeologist, was commissioned to begin excavation at Persepolis in 1931, which was funded by the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute and John Rockefeller. Educated Europeans such as André Godard led schools of architecture in Iran during this time. Godard was appointed as the director of Iran Bastan Museum and the first dean of the Faculty of Fine Arts at Tehran University. In the 30s, Tehran underwent significant changes with the destruction of old walls and gateways and the creation of a new network of open spaces. The process of widening and constructing streets began in 1924 to accommodate the increasing demographic pressure, new motor vehicles, and the provision of urban infrastructure. The new Street Widening Act of 1933 aimed for a new urban order with a grid street pattern, uniform facades, inflexible zoning, wide boulevards, tree-lined sidewalks, axial spatial urban form, and symmetrical squares. The act marked the first fundamental legal basis of modern urbanization in Iran and was drawn up by French engineer François de Romaizière. The street widening process involved the demolition of houses and buildings in the way of new boulevards and streets. French-influenced education and Franco-Iranian relationships were important at this time, and France was the primary destination for Western-educated Iranians seeking employment with national urban projects. In 1937, a new plan was prepared to expand the city based on the map of 1933, which included detailed accommodation for street adjustments, dimensions, and corners for more comfortable car circulation. The plan resulted in the spatial segregation and polarization of the city into a cosmopolitan north and prosperous and cosmopolitan north and impoverished and traditional south. During the first Pahlavi era, Tehran city center shifted northward with the construction of new institutions, and two important streets, Shah Reza and Pahlavi, formed the main east-west and north-south axis of the city structure. By the end of this era, Tehran had expanded to cover an area 2.5 times bigger than during the Qajar period, reaching around 46 square kilometers. However, the modernity projects were halted due to the Second World War and the abdication of Reza Shah. This chapter discusses the transfer of planning ideas and techniques from one context to another, specifically focusing on the French planning model's implementation in Tehran. The military played a significant role in the implementation of the plans, which transformed the socio-political structure of the city and led to the clustering of neighborhoods based on new criteria. The rise of the new middle class began concurrently with significant urban intervention, leading to the representation of public space characteristic of a bourgeois city. This chapter argues that planning techniques cannot be uprooted from their original context and transplanted elsewhere, but must be translated and adapted. It concludes by emphasizing that planning must be understood as a means of constructing the future, and this understanding should be based on social, political, and historical explanation. The third chapter of the book examines the relationship between Tehran's urban planning and state power ideologies, bureaucratic rationality, and transcending urban life. Le Corbusier's concept of architectural revolution is discussed, where architecture is seen as a political apparatus in combating social unrest. This chapter also explores the significance of utopia and heterotopia in the discourse on space, culture, and politics, and their role in shaping social orders. Finally, the political character of modern architecture and the utopian nature of urban elements are discussed. In Architectural Revolution, Le Corbusier concluded that the revolution could be avoided through the scientific application of innovative techniques. This rather optimistic faith in the rational efficiency of the scientific progress, usually classified as a typical feature of the modern movement, even in the Middle Eastern context. In summary, modern architecture was seen as an overtly political apparatus that could challenge social unrest through innovative techniques, but also as a utopian project with a critical function to challenge the present society. By addressing this critical point in Iranian modern history, this chapter analyzes utopian planning strategy, which ultimately resulted in mass rallies and urban uprising of 1979. In 1968, a major piece of legislation enabled the municipality to implement Tehran's Comprehensive Plan, TCP, the planning of master plan, which was supposed to take Tehran forward by 25 years, entrusted to Victor Groen. Tehran Comprehensive Plan of 1968 integrated all the elements of 60s American cities, such as separation of functions, highways, suburbs, shopping center, and housing area. Embracing Wright's Garden City motif, Victor Groen's Metropolis of Tomorrow centered on the idea of cluster planning, influenced by linear version of Howard's social city with satellite garden city around the metropolis core. Tehran's master plan created a socially segregated society with strict class divisions. The plan featured new town projects such as Kuy-e-Narmak, Naziabad, and Tehran Pars, each designated for different income levels. Critics compared the plan to Los Angeles, as it relied on American companies and Western-educated elites like Abdulaziz Farmanfarmayan and Fereydun Ghaffari. For creating the almost American metropolis, high-rise and mid-rise residential buildings became one of the main typologies of master plan proposed. In 1968, Rahman Golzar and Jordan Grozen and partners asked to collaborate with Victor Groen to design the biggest residential complex in the Middle East at the time, Ekbatan residential complex located at the western edge of Tehran. This chapter examines how architecture and planning have been used as political tools to maintain power relations, and disseminate ideologies. It argues that studying urban process and planning politics in Third World is crucial for understanding political changes in developing countries. The chapter explores the complex relationship between modernization, architecture, and politics, highlighting the role of modern architecture in promoting progressive ideas and serving as a tangible expression of political systems. It also discusses Tehran's utopian urban projects, which created pseudo-political nodes for active political representation. And the fourth chapter of the book explores the political conflicts and struggles for control of urban public spaces, highlighting the impact of violence on the production of urban space. Focusing on protest square and insurgent urbanism during political revolution and social unrest, the chapter aims to conceptualize the politically productive potential of public space. Using theoretical framework and case studies, the chapter analyzes the transformative power of protest squares as urban political spaces and their relationship with politics, democracy, and urban space. The case study section focuses on contemporary examples, particularly in the Middle East, to better understand power relations in protest square and socio-political context. This chapter examines three crucial political squares in modern Tehran that played a vital role in Iran's political history. It shows how the newly built network of streets and squares in northern Tehran became the city's primary political public spaces. Tubkhane Square, meaning place of cannon or artillery barracks, is a significant historical square in Tehran at the convergence point of 6 broad streets. Its defining feature is the permanent settlement of cannons and gunners in the surrounding races. In his book, Ernest Orso described Tubkhane Square as the unofficial meeting place between the king and the people of Tehran. From 1949 onwards, Tubkhane Square became a crucial gathering point for mass rallies and social demonstration in support of the Iranian oil nationalization movement, as sentiment for the nationalization of Iran's oil industry grew. In the days leading up to the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat, the square became the focal point for political gatherings by anti-Shah and communist parties. Tubkhane Square's political importance dates back to late Qajar era and Iranian constitutional revolution. After the bombardment of the Iranian parliament in 1908, it became the main gathering point for anti-revolutionaries and government supporters. With the construction of new governmental institutions, the square was renamed Sepah Square in honor of Reza Shah's title as Commander-in-Chief of the Army. The statue of Reza Shah, surrounded by 4 communist soldiers and Persepolis-style columns and bas-relief decoration, was installed at the center of the square in 1945, representing him as Iran's hero of the future. After the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, the statue of Reza Shah Pahlavi was pulled down into Tubkhane Square, and the square's name was changed to Imam Khomeini Square. This event marked a new chapter in the political life of the square. The second case study is Baharistan Square, located near the first Iranian parliament building, Sepah Salar Mosque and School, one of the largest mosques in Tehran, and Negaristan Garden. Its central location made it the first modern focal point in Iranian political life. After the establishment of parliament in the Baharistan building, this historical square became a scene for political gatherings and social demonstrations. Major political events such as the 1908 bombardment of parliament, the political violence and terror of 1907, and the social demonstration of 1924 are among the defining moments that shaped the urban life of Baharistan Square. Examining these events underscores the changing role of people from passive observers to active participants in the political life of modern Tehran. In July 1952, the Tudeh party organized a demonstration against the Shah in Baharistan Square. Kayhan newspaper reported that the closure of shops, city buses, and factories, as well as the workers' strike in the railways, all contributed to the demonstrators' growing number. Despite police efforts to prevent government office closure, they were unsuccessful after 9 a.m. Street fighting intensified in Baharistan Plaza and the bazaar around noon. In 2013, declassified CIA documents on the United States' role in 1953 coup in Iran were posted by the National Security Archive. These documents included maps depicting the disposition of ruffians between the 3 target squares, Tubkhane, Baharistan, and Ark, in 3 phases. The first map showed the disposition of the ruffians paid by coup organizers to demonstrate early on 19 August of 1953. The second map depicted the involvement of pro-Shah police, military units, and undercover agents in the coup starting mid-morning. This image depicts an officer in Baharistan Square in Tehran demonstrating for the Shah of Iran on 3rd of March of 1953. He can be seen striking a pose reminiscent of Mussolini as he addresses the crowd in front of Parliament Gate, wearing a photo of the Shah on his hat. The Shahyad Monument was erected in 1971 to celebrate the 2,500-year anniversary of the Persian Empire. The monument, also known as In the Memory of the King, is a symbolic gateway to the capital city from the international airport and was intended to promote the idea of the great civilization, like Mussolini's Olympiad of Civilization. In 1975, the New York Times published an essay about a plan for a new utopian project in Tehran called Shahistan Pahlavi, or Place of Shah, which included a massive urban plaza, Shah and Nation Square. The plaza was planned to be larger than Red Square in Moscow and was designed by the planners of the English New Town, Milton Keynes, and the American firm of Jacqueline T. Robertson. Shah and Nation Square was planned as a multi-purpose square in Tehran's new capital complex, featuring various ministry building, financial institution, commercial offices, shopping areas, housing, entertainment, and recreational facilities, and a national cultural center. It was supposed to be even larger than Nakhsh Jahan Square in Isfahan, and was compared to other famous urban achievements throughout history. However, this utopian project was never realized. In 1978, more than 2 million people occupied the brand new Shahyad Square in protest against the Shah, making it a heterotopia due to its ambivalent nature and coexisting of nearly incompatible realities. The fifth chapter of the book discusses the contemporary democracy crisis across the globe caused by environmental challenges, forced immigration, class struggle, radical exclusion, pandemic outbreak, and economic inequalities. The success of cities must supplement state efforts to increase sovereignty in capacities. Social movements are essential drivers of social change in the fight to overcome the crisis of democracy. Protests and social movements such as Occupy movement and Black Lives Matter have led to democratization and decolonization of public space and urban landscape. This chapter represented the idea of protest square as a new global phenomenon to focus on the centrality of squares in recent social protests. It focuses critically on the contemporary condition by reclaiming the totality of Tehran's square and framing the idea of political life through urban space. The chapter also emphasizes the significance of protests and social movements in challenging the existing power structure and rethinking structures of inequality. The 2009 Green Movement in Iran, which was a series of protests against the presidential election result, saw hundreds of protests gathered in Tehran's Azadi Square. The square held historical importance as a site of protest and mobilization, which attracted protesters during the movement. However, the meaning and images of the square were reappropriated by the protesters during the demonstrations, highlighting how political memory works in relation to space. Protest squares in recent years have led a significant impact on politics in various regions worldwide. Tahrir Square, Independence Square, Syntagma Square, Taksim Square, and Azadi Square have become symbolic of revolutionary changes in the Middle East and Europe with unique urban characteristics such as centrality, strategic location, historical and political memories, temporary creation of just urban space, and spatial flexibility. In this chapter, I have discussed the growing importance of social movements and their ability to create democratic spaces in urban settings. Specifically, I examined the emergence of protest square as a global phenomenon and their potential for promoting real democracy. In addition, I have explored the global municipalism movement, also known as fearless cities or cities of change, which seeks to radicalize democracy, promote participatory power structure, and drive the transition towards an economy that cares for people and the environment. In addition, I analyzed the global platform for the right to the city, a politically useful framing that advocates for socially and especially just distribution of resources, political agency, and socio-cultural diversity in urban setting. The chapter explores the impact of digital agency on protest movements, highlighting the changes brought by the digitalization of social interaction. Social media and platform and other digital media play a crucial role in creating collective actors and sustaining mobilization, but their success is influenced by several criteria. The hybrid nature of protest movements in the digital era offers various modes of participation using offline and online structure and mechanisms. The role of visual narratives of protest square in screening dissent is also discussed, along with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on protest movement. Despite the lack of street activism, social movements have adapted to generate new radical practices to address the population's most urgent needs. The Square documentary follows the Egyptian revolutionary through the perspectives of protesters and depicts the experiences during the transitional period in Tahrir Square under military rule. At the time of writing this book, the Women, Life, Freedom movement had not yet emerged. However, as the title suggests, the emergence of the new waves of radical urbanism was anticipated. Here, I argue that the modern democracy faces the challenge of balancing the local participation with centralized global power, leading to the rise of protest movements and social activism in public space as a decentralized form of government. The use of digital media and platforms, including social media, has reshaped global protest movements, but presents challenges like media monopolization. The pandemic highlighted the importance of activism and solidarity in communities. The Women, Life, Freedom movement in Iran has since used social media to demand equal rights for women and challenge the patriarchal laws. The book discusses two dominant modernization strategies in Tehran, Tabula Rasa and utopian urbanism, which transformed the structure of old Tehran and created open space for active political engagement. Public spaces such as the square play a significant role in forming urban social networks with characteristics such as centrality, monumentality, and strategic location. Moreover, to connect people with the larger population and to activate the collective memory embedded within urban context, the previous geographies of protest in Tehran provided the primary space to connect people with a larger population. The use of digital media and platforms has reshaped protest movements worldwide, with the pandemic highlighting the existing inequalities and inspiring alternative bottom-up solidarity networks. Thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much to talk about. And thank you for this wonderful presentation. So we have time for questions. Let's see if our guests have any questions first, and then you have a question.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the redesign of the city in order to revolution-proof the city, and how to prevent people from seizing public spaces.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So I think the starting point from my point of view was like to kind of check if there is any relationship between the urban form and the important political events in the city. I think that was the first point that I tried to see, that if there is any relationship. And I went back to the history of the urban transformation in Tehran. And I realized that there were many important points and decisions about the master plan and also about the urban form and urban grid of the city that also influenced the political activism. And I think that the cases of the different protest squares, such as Tubkhane Square and Baharistan Square, and how the definition of this square in the modernization project in Tehran happened, I think that was the points that I could find or relate my initial question about this really complex relationship. But at the same time, I think that there are different actors that we need to take a look. And also, rather than just going through the specific cases, I also was curious about the paradigms and about the foundations, about the theoretical framework, and how the idea of the planning or planning politics that I would like to define is also related to the political history of the city, and how we can tell the story that from the urban or architectural point of view or planning point of view, that also links to the political history and important historical moments or paradigm shifts or revolutions in a city like Tehran. I hope I could be.
Were there specific things that were done in terms of design of the city in order to prevent people from engaging in protests in specific spaces?
So, back to 2019, I published an article with ArcNet, with MIT Press. And the idea was like that the government, they are defining the specific nodes of protest in the municipality of Tehran to be able to control the protest and define the space for protesters. It was, and I think it's still a controversial, kind of news. I think after the COVID, and especially after the Women Life Freedom movement, I don't think that this kind of these strategies were rather successful in defining the specific nodes of protest in Tehran.
Thank you so much for your talk. The history of it was fascinating, especially the information and images. But related to the previous question, listening to the lecture, one gets a sense that the public squares that were created and boulevards that were constructed, one gets a sense that they were created to allow public engagement and gathering. When I wonder if we're forgetting especially when you were talking about the public squares during the Haqamanian times and Persepolis, when these areas were private quarters, they weren't really public quarters. They were for the kings, the monarchies, the nobilities. And coming to the modern era, the 20th century, especially 19th century, these public squares, if you could talk from it from the other lens, that these public squares were not so much created to allow for public engagement, rather the histories behind it were more centered around allowing the state to suppress public engagement and gather in revolutionary activity. Because you mentioned, for instance, a lot of French architects and urban designers coming to Iran and designing modernization around the new Tehran. And Haussmann himself, Napoleon III's key architect, a key reason for the destruction of old quarters in Paris was to pave new boulevards and allow the army to circulate through the city, prevent barricades from being put up by protesters, preventing the armies from circulating through the city and essentially take hold of the city, as happened in 1871 with the Paris Commune. So the history behind it, I wonder if you could speak more about the anti-revolutionary aspects of public design, of urban modernization, of creation of wide boulevards, of public squares, from that perspective.
Thank you very much. And specifically the part that you mentioned about the Haussmann's urbanization in Paris, I think that it's relevant because, as you mentioned, so it was like the idea of like creating this open matrix in the city was like to make it, facilitate the movement of anti-revolutionaries. And I think also that can be the case also for Tehran. So the decision of comparing the Tehran's street maps of 1933 and 1937 to Haussmann's urbanization or Haussmann's interventions in Paris was like, because in both cases you could see that how the old structure and the old city walls, old gateways destructed radically. And the word that I would like to use is like also the role of military in kind of, I remember that in the book I quoted somewhere from this top-down process of street-wide widening act in Tehran, and how it was like coming by the force of the military, and how it was like a day-to-day activity to make sure that there is no resistance, by the citizens for the huge destruction, to be able to kind of make these new bulwarks. I actually would like to emphasize that, yes, both of them, I define the idea of action and counteraction. Sometimes the counteraction facilitate the process, for the revolutionaries, the thing that also you couldn't anticipate in case of Paris. So what was important in this case, especially by showcasing the two political squares in Tehran, was like how the idea of defining this open matrix, even through that top-down and military-enforced urban interventions by a street widening act, enabled the citizens to become, rather than just kind of the passive observants, to become the active participants in the political process of modern Tehran, which was not like this, kind of before all these urban interventions. As you mentioned, and so it was like the idea of the squares in the Iranian history was like rather like a court-related or imperial or king and or the people, kind of meeting place. But after all this urban transformation, and we know what was the initial purpose, but it's also important to see that how the idea of like active engagement and active participation in political life through the different events happened. And I think that was an interesting, kind of point for me to see that how these actions and counteractions, how we can define that what motivated this change. I hope I could have answered your question.
I was really interested in how you saw in your research that in the sort of top-down planning of imposing the North and South division seemed to be like a reflection of an existing social order. And I wonder if you've seen any difference in the type of urban designs that were implemented in North versus South after those were implemented.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So, in the book, I mentioned that the structure of Old Tehran, which was mostly based on mahalle, or like the specific definition of the community cluster, was radically changed after all these planning interventions, which also led to what you mentioned, like the segregated, which also create a kind of segregated city, which now also we can feel, when we are living in Tehran, which is still there. Or what I would like to call it, like bipolarizing the city to the north and to the south. And it's interesting to note that the places, for example, like Baharistan, were initially located at the north part of Tehran, which is now not like this. Now Baharistan is now located at the central part of the Tehran. But I mean, this definition or this segregated community that was like the result of after these top-down planning approaches, I think we are still living with all that segregated city paradigms, or like north-south or east-west, kind of definition of the city, or the idea of I think it's another research project by itself, but the idea of like I had a slide on the Ekbatan residential complex located in the western edge of the city, and also you can refer to like Naziabad or Tehran Pars or Kuyenarmak, for example, located in the eastern edge of the city. I think that's kind of we definitely can conclude that all that kind of especially the idea of like creating the spatially segregated city, it's still there. And also the rising of the new middle class was like happening after all this master plan definition of the new social housing project located especially in east and west edge of the city. I think these are the points that I can mention for now.
Mina.
Thank you so much for the talk. I was wondering, you spoke about decolonizing the public space in the global south. I was wondering if you could speak about what that means, like the term or the process of decolonization. Does it map to Iran, West, indigenous cultural traditions or whatnot?
I think also the idea of decolonizing the public space, it's goes beyond just this book project by itself, and it's also related to my other book project, for example, in Southeast Asia, in Kuala Lumpur. So the idea is like how we can so we use the Western theoretical framework to be able to understand the process or the urban transformation that are happening in a city like Tehran. What we would like to argue is that this is not enough. We need a new language or new structure from the local point of view to be able to realize that what's happening, or you mentioning the important things like religion. I think that we need to kind of find a new way to be able to talk about, for example, public space or cities in the global south. And I would like to mention the cases of the Tehran and Kuala Lumpur that I've been engaged in. And so this is part of the ongoing research effort that we would like to formulate a new perspective for defining the idea of the public space or private space, or dichotomy of public and private, which is I think it's different from the dominant Western or Western theory that we define, and find a new language to be able to talk or to be able to interpret this complex relationship.
Vita.
Thanks very much. Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I know your book is focused on Tehran, but I was wondering if you could, because you mentioned Asma Mehan as well, and I was wondering what makes these squares so political, because I would say that Asma's Naqshband square is not very political in the same way, and it's actually hamstrung by sort of artificial ideas of what historicity looks like, right, and like with the UN and making it a sort of cultural center. So I was wondering if you could speak about what makes these places in Tehran so different than other squares in Iran, where they are so politicized in ways that others are depoliticized. Or maybe I'm wrong, maybe they aren't depoliticized in Tehran.
So my argument here is not like just kind of, my main argument here is not like just these squares are political, you know. What I did was like to kind of engage with with the history of these public spaces, and to relate that history and also that important parts of their history with the political changes in Tehran. So there might be other squares or other public spaces, and there are definitely, but my main focus was like to kind of showcase that how this urban transformation, or how the spatial transformation, how it was linked to the important political changes or political shift in modern history of Tehran. I think because of like confining the place and also the era, and also like my specific, kind of focus on the modern political history of Tehran, I picked this Baharistan and Tubkhane and Azadi. But there are lots of new and emerging political public spaces in Tehran as well.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I learned a lot. I was wondering, so my question is basically, is Tehran a city? And there are a few reasons I asked that question. So you use this formulation, utopia and heterotopia, and to me, those two concepts there's a contradiction there. Heterotopia was like quite like responding specifically to heterotopia as a concept, like a sort of organizing concept, and then there's sort of a lot of different spaces. Right? And so if we think of like a city like Tehran, you think, well, Tehran's a city, there's this master plan, but of course like it incorporated Shahid, right? That's a whole different city. So the memory of this other city is already there. On the other hand, we know that, for example, the sort of sources of funding that like places like mosques and like something like the Husseini or Shah, these places were built of, were not coming from the same sources of funding as the state. And so you can basically say, well, there are many cities in this city. I mean, I lived in LA for like just shy of a decade, and I often wonder to myself, like, how many cities are here? There are so many ways to live in LA, and the same goes with Tehran. You're looking around and you're like, I don't even know, like, it's baffling. It's almost a miracle that you're in this place and that it came to be. And if you're trying to think of it in terms of a process of production, the city as the memory of a people becoming and arriving at the place in which they can not only sustain themselves, but to be able to dictate and guide themselves towards like some kind of destiny. Well, that model in a heterotopic understanding, that model falls short. All of a sudden, not only is the beginning, like the memories of how people got there very different, but so too are all the different visions that people have of where they're going. And so that's like in this sort of space. And then of course there's the home. Like I was thinking like, you know, condos are just like so boring and so dismal and so and lifeless, you know? But of course, like, or apartment complexes, but you know, I've been in many different apartments and many of them look the same, but they're also so different because people have memories and histories and personalities and character, and the sort of space becomes a reflection of the soul. And so when I was getting the talk, I got a lot from the sort of top down, like there's this master plan, and then that ends up creating the condition for a kind of response. But I wonder if there is this other side, right? Not the administrative point of view, but actually the point of view of life. And I was wondering how, and that to me seems to sort of speak to that, what I see as kind of an antinomy between the kind of utopian project of the state, right? And then the sort of what heterotopia invites us to remember and how we think of a city's coming. So I was thinking, so just my question is Tehran a city? And how in the book do you navigate that relationship between the state and just the experiences that got us there?
So the question is any city a city?
Yeah. Is a city, yeah, is a city a city?
Is a city a city?
Yeah.
I think your suggestion would be the title of another book, Tehran, a city within a city.
Yeah.
So you, as an architect, I think I'm so courageous to talk, with lots of people from humanities here. So we use these ideas of like heterotopian or the idea of utopia or heterotopia. I really like that, what you mentioned. And usually, I think from the architectural discipline, we use these two keywords to for example, heterotopia is like for us the other place, or the parallel space. So my definition from utopia and heterotopia is coming from that tradition in defining the kind of the space, or how it's related to the idea of the space, or spatial theories. And that might be a different, kind of interpretation from what you're suggesting. But I think all of this reality coexist and we cannot ignore. So, and yes, you mentioned that in the book, here I showcased lots of top-down approaches, but you didn't hear that much from the other side or from the. So I think the part that I engaged a lot also with different actors and with the other side of the story was like during the street widening map, which I was successful to find in the archival, kind of history, the narratives from the local people and how they refer to the Senate that time to kind of object to this top-down destruction of old city walls and widening of the streets. And I kind of reflected more on them in the book. But yes, I think that the total idea of the book is kind of to go back to that history and to see that top-down approaches and how it enacted, all this, and how it's in relation with the political life or modern life of Tehran. But if I have the opportunity and chance to work on another book project in this area, I would like to kind of do the vice versa, to see that how the reaction, the unheard voices, the underrepresented, and that I think need a lot of archival work. And yes, definitely, I think I'm interested to kind of focus more on that.
And on that note, thank you so much. I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you.